Hi, this is Sara Levin, theartfulinker. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, and today I've got 3 cards for you using the Forever Greenery Suite. We're going to start with a simple level card and use the Forever Greenery designer paper. This is a 12 by 12 designer paper stack that comes with 6 double-sided designs. And that means you've got 12 designs in all. So let me set this aside and we'll get to creating. For simple cards, I often like to use the note cards and envelopes that come in Whisper White or Very Vanilla that Stampin' Up! Has. They're a slightly smaller card base. And I've got 3 2x2 squares of the Forever Greenery designer paper, and we're going to start by adhering these with multi-purpose glue, and let's line this piece up on my grid paper, and I'm going to just eyeball center here. I am using the grid paper to make sure that my card is straight. If you prefer, you can slide this into your paper trimmer and add a light horizontal pencil mark at the halfway point so that you know that you're absolutely lined up. Okay, and then adhere this piece, and then adhere this piece. And leaving just a slight gap between my panels here. Okay, and then let's take our paper snips and trim the excess off, and you can just use the side of the note card as your guide for trimming. Okay, and let's take these out of the way, and time for some stamping. For the stamping, we're going to use the Forever Fern stamp set, and I've got a leaf, maybe another leaf or berries, depending on how you want to look at it and color it, and then my sentiment. So let's move a couple things out of the way. And I've got Pretty Peacock and Granny Apple Green, and we're going to stamp this leaf in Pretty Peacock. So let's ink that up, and I do like to tap my ink on rather than tap my stamp in the ink. And let's do a second set of leaves and give that a rub. Okay, and close this and put it out of the way, and grab the Granny Apple Green and tap that onto, these may be eucalyptus leaves or they might be berries, again depending on how you choose to color them. Give that a hold. Okay, and put that out of the way, and then we'll do our sentiment. On a scrap of Whisper White, I do save many of those offcuts from creating layers for my standard size cards. And let's ink our sentiment with Pretty Peacock. Give that a rub and straight up. Okay, and let's take our scissors and do a little bit of cutting. I'm just going to eyeball the straight here. Now I could have cut this narrower to begin with, but by not doing that, it meant I didn't have to be as precise with my whether my sentiment was straight or not. I'm just cutting a banner end here in the one end by cutting up the center first. Let's move the stamps out of the way. And then we're going to, since this is a simple card, we're going to use scissors and cut out these bits rather than the coordinating dies. And the trick to cutting by hand is rotating the paper, not moving your scissors or making big cuts with your scissors. And you can choose to leave no border, a little bit of border, a lot of border, whatever makes you happy. There's not a wrong way in that sense. And the Stampin' Up! Paper snips are great for giving you good clean cuts, okay? If you're rotating your paper. If you're trying to, I'm going to say muscle the scissors along, cutting by hand will be more challenging. Let the paper do the bulk of the work for you, and just make tiny cuts with your scissors. Unless you're cutting away a straight hunk of paper, and sometimes that's easier to get the excess out of the way. Oops. Okay, 2 leaves, and then this last bit. Cut that away, and then just, and you can cut as far down in here or not as you care to. Just remember, rotate that paper. Okay, now let's scoop this out of the way and put this card together the rest of the way. Okay, I've got my dimensionals over here. I'm going to stack up my greenery, and I like to fan it and stagger it just a little bit, and then take my multi-purpose glue and add just a couple little dots back here. And I am going to stick a couple of dimensionals on low. And don't press it down yet until you know for sure that's where you want that to be. And then a dimensional here. And add a little bit of multi-purpose glue. Because I'm going to stick that right to my leaves here. Okay, there's our simple stamping card. So let's set this out of the way and we'll move on to the next one. For this second card, we're going to step it up a little bit and use the Forever Fern bundle, which includes the Forever Fern stamp set and then the coordinating dies. Forever Flourishing. And we're going to take a piece of Whisper White and a couple of our leaf stamps, Just Jade ink, and Soft Seafoam ink. So let's ink up the leaves. Again, I like to tap my ink on, no smushing my stamp into the ink or tapping my stamp in the ink. I find I get fewer halos and good ink coverage by tapping my ink on. And then I've got these berries or eucalyptus leaves that I used on the first card, and I'm going to ink those in Soft Seafoam. And I'm just trying to space these out so that I'll be able to use the dies for all of these rather than cutting them out by hand. So let me go do that and use the Forever Flourishing dies to cut these, and I'll be back. Next, we're going to stamp our sentiment on a piece of Just Jade, and I'm using the Hello stamp again. I love to have Just Because cards on hand. They are my most used cards, or maybe tied for thank yous and Just Because. And then let's sprinkle this with a little white Stampin' Emboss powder. And then I'm going to take that and set it with my heat tool. And I'm going to heat from behind so that any loose particles won't blow around and leave speckles on my darker cardstock. I'll be back in a moment. Okay, next we're going to want a piece of the Forever Greenery designer paper, and we're going to use this design here in the Just Jade and Soft Seafoam. I've already cut a piece. And then I have a layer of Soft Seafoam that I have embossed with this Greenery embossing folder. I did spritz it using my Stampin' Spritzer and some alcohol before embossing to get an even deeper impression. Now I want to adhere this piece to my Soft Seafoam layer with multi-purpose glue. And come right down here to the bottom. Before I give it a press, I'm going to check and make sure that I'm straight by looking at the back side. Okay. Oops. And then I've got my card base in Soft Seafoam and a Whisper White layer for the inside. And I've got a Soft Seafoam strip to accent on the inside. It's just an easy way to finish the inside of your card and leave plenty of space for you to leave a personalized message. My friends tell me that they much prefer a handwritten message to a stamped message inside. Okay, and adhere that piece. And then we need to adhere this piece. So let me grab my dimensionals. And we're going to add plenty of these so that the card base is well supported. This layer is well supported. Okay, and let's take, I've added some additional along this side where I've got a little bit of a ripple, and the dimensionals will help to keep that even with the rest of the layer. Oops. These are sticking to my fingers. They want to tag along. Okay, I'm just going to line this up with my grid paper. If you don't know, grid paper is available in my store so that you can use that for your crafting as well. Okay, let's sweep these out of the way. Next, I'm going to use one of these Forever Gold designer paper pieces. These are really lovely with all of their detail. And here are my dimensionals. Going to add dimensionals just behind this hexagonal piece. Oops. And I'm going to place it lightly and not give it a good press yet. So I've got my stamped pieces that we did before, and then I've taken those and used those Forever Flourishing dies to cut them. We're going to tuck this one back in here. Oops. And I want to tuck one of these pieces behind as well. And then add one of these on the front in with this, and then come down hanging out the bottom with that as well. Now give that all a good press. And then I've cut the sentiment using a stitched shapes dies. Those, in my opinion, are a craft room staple. If you're die cutting, you should have a set of the stitch shapes. They could possibly be my most used dies. Okay, and then we're just going to add that right here in the center. And there's our card number 2 using the Forever Greenery Suite. So let me clear this away and I'll be back with the third card. For this card, we're going to start with a 3 7/8 by 5 1/8 piece of Fluid 100 watercolor paper. I'm going to smush just a tiny bit of Magenta Madness ink on my silicone craft sheet and take my Stampin' Spritzer filled with water, and I want to give this a little bit of a spritz to loosen it up. And let's spritz just a little bit more, and then I'm going to give this a tiny bit of spritz and just plunk, smash, and that's it. Leave it alone, and I'm going to set this aside to dry. Now if yours dries with too much of a buckle or hump, spritz the back lightly and it will release. I'll be back as soon as that's dry. With this dry, we're going to add some embossing paste. I've got my silicone craft sheet again, and a little bit of embossing paste and one of the palette knives. And I'm just going to put down my basic pattern mask here, and I transfer the embossing paste to my silicone craft sheet so that I don't have the whole jar open at one time. Embossing paste does dry out fairly quickly, and this way I can work with a small amount of it and not have to worry that it is drying out. And then I'll just add the remainder back to the tub. So let me scrape this off just like you would clean up a cake if you were stenciling or putting on a crumb coat, just a thin coat. If you put the embossing paste on thickly, it will take longer to dry. And then just lift this off, and then you want to rinse everything that you've used with the embossing paste, or put it in a pan of water until you can get to it so that the embossing paste doesn't dry on your tools. Okay, so next let's do some stamping with some of the leaves. I'm going to start with some pretty peacock and this leaf that looks a little bit like olive leaves to me. I'm sure there are other plants that have the same leaf. I'm going to do 3 of these. I like to stamp more than I need, just in case. Let me close that up and grab the Granny Apple Green. And then we're going to take this smaller leaf cluster and do that in Granny Apple Green. And then that might be enough of that one. Let's close up the Granny Apple Green and pull out the Magenta Madness. And we'll ink this. Add some vibrancy. And then how about have one that's stamped off? Maybe 2 that are stamped off. Okay, so I'm going to take this and cut with the Forever Flourishing dies, and I'll be right back. I'm going to stamp the sentiment on Pretty Peacock, and I'm going to use that same hello that I've used on the previous 2 cards, and I've inked it in Versamark, and then sprinkle with the white Stampin' Emboss powder. And of course, just like on the other pieces, I'm going to heat from behind to minimize the amount of, I may want to stamp that again. So it's very, not just a little, it is very humid in my house today. And so it's humid in the studio as well. And that means that your embossing powder can stick where you don't want it to. So let's give that a flick. That one looks much, much better. So heat that from behind to minimize the amount of speckles that you'll get. And then I'm going to cut it with one of my Tasteful Labels dies. And I'll be right back. And now it's time to assemble the card. So I've got a thick Whisper white card base and a strip of Granny Apple Green for the inside. And it is not the full width. It is the width as if you were adding a layer. So there will be a little bit of border on both sides. And then need to adhere these 2 pieces. And I'm going to use my Stampin' Seal Plus. Let's just start this a little bit. And I want to come as close out here to the edges as possible. Since watercolor paper, often when you've used it, has just a little bit of a buckle. And then this Granny Apple Green layer has a very narrow border. And if I didn't say, that was the Stampin' Seal Plus. Okay, there we go. Now let's add that to our Whisper White with dimensionals. Well, not yet. I'm getting ahead of myself. So I have used my tailored tag punch to cut hexagons, oops, let me scoop them up, out of Granny Apple Green and Just Jade. And then I've embossed them with the Greenery embossing folder. Now I have tips for cutting these in the one simple trick video that I shared today. And I'm just going to add dimensionals to the back of this Granny Apple Green because I want to set these in place before I glue them down or adhere them. Okay, and then this one is also going to get dimensionals. So don't be like me. Do this before you add the matting layer. But since I've already added that, I'm going to work around it. So let's put these down. Oops. Okay. And then this is just going to fit right in next to this piece. And then the same here. I'm just adding adhesive to the halfway mark. And then this one will get adhesive all over. And then put this one on with the dimensionals. Okay, let's close this and grab my paper snips. And I am going to carefully cut down the side here. Okay, pop those out of the way. Now we're going to add this to our card base. I can't say this often enough, dimensionals are inexpensive, so don't worry about using enough to really do the job. Okay. All right, let's sweep some of this out of the way. And then we have our leaves that we stamped and die cut. And we're just going to arrange some of those in here. Oops, fingers aren't wanting to pick everything up. Okay, so I'm going to take this as a group now and dot glue in amongst the pieces. So let's make sure this little guy is going to stay put, and he didn't want to. So we'll just tuck him right back in there. And some behind this one. You don't need great big gobs of glue. And then we will add some across the back. This guy's just playing up. Let's tuck him back in there one more time and make add our arrangement here. Okay, and then I have a vellum circle and these gold rings, and I want to stick my gold ring to my vellum circle, and I've got a bit of the adhesive sheet here. Let's grab just one of the rings. I might need to peel back 2 pieces of this to have enough width for the ring. Here we go. Now, the rings don't come in this container. This is an old embellishment container, and they fit perfectly in there. Okay, so we've picked up a little adhesive on the back of this, and I'm just going to take this and turn it over and lay it down on my vellum here. And then we have our sentiment cut from the Pretty Peacock using that Tasteful Labels die. And let's add a couple of dimensionals on the inside here, because that's going to sit over top of this ring a little bit. Okay, and then we can use this same area to put our dimensionals on the back of the vellum to hold it in place. Let's put that one back down. Okay, let's make sure we're straight. I need to make one little adjustment here. Okay, and then, so we want to tuck in some ribbon. I'm just going to make a small zigzag here and cut the ends with my scissors. Just giving it a little angle cut. Toss that out of there. And let's take some glue dots. That's one more up here. Okay. Oops. And then I got just a little ahead of myself, so I'm going to use my take your pick and lift this and stick my ribbon right underneath. And I've got a little bit of greenery here, and I'm going to add a dimensional to that and tuck him right in here along the edge. Okay, and there is the Avid level card of this 3 sets of cards using the Forever Greenery Suite. Thanks for stopping by today. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and then click the bell if you would like to receive notifications the next time I upload a video. Bye. Have a great day.